All right. Well, good morning and welcome to the RIAC Learning Series session. The title today is A Deeper Dive into the 131. It's about the Impact Region-wide RIAC Budget expense form and how to use it to maximize regional system of care efforts. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items first. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and mute your mics. However, these learning opportunities are for you guys, so feel free to unmute during the session as needed to ask questions or to add to the conversation. Also, you may use the chat box if you prefer for questions and or comments. Lee is going to be monitoring this during the session. Time has been carved out at the end for questions and answers, and we hope that you guys do have some questions and answers because we've gotten a lot of, or you guys have questions, we might have answers, but we have gotten a lot of questions over the 131 and the RIAC budget over the past several years. So please utilize this opportunity to your advantage. Also, the workshop will be recorded and posted on the RIAC's YouTube channel. And so we'll put that link in the chat box as we go through the session today, and then again at the end of the session. So we've got our session set up just a little bit different today, and I wanted to kind of give you a rundown of what that looks like. We're going to be given a brief overview of the 131, taking a deeper dive, kind of honing in on some of those questions that we've received over the years. Then we've got a video segment from Diane, Gruen-Kidd, and myself. We were able to get together and allow Diane to talk to us about where the RIAC funds come from, because we also get a lot of questions on that. And then after that, we'll spend the last half of the session with a panel, and they are going to be talking to us about how to garner support from the community mental health centers and system of care partners when additional funds are needed, and how to use those funds to maximize system of care efforts. And the reason that these panelists have been invited to speak with us today is because their RIACs have been able to successfully do this the past couple of years. So we are excited to have them here with us today to be able to provide guidance and tips on how to do that. And then, as I stated a minute ago, at the end, we do have that opportunity for questions and answers. And I promise to get you out of here before or by 11:30. So some of the things that we're going to cover today is, what is the 131? What's its purpose? What's included on it and why? What is the RIAC's role in the 131? Where do these funds come from? What can the funds be used for? What can't the funds be used for? How are these funds monitored? How are they tracked? And again, our session panel with our panelists, how RIACs can work with community mental health care centers and system of care partners to garner that support needed when additional funds are needed. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So if you haven't seen the 134 or 131 form before, this is what it looks like. So this is really small. I realize that on your screen. And so what I'll do when we send follow-up for the session is I will send you a form. This is a form from one of our RIACs. I have marked out who the RIAC is and some of the information on here that is a little bit more personal. But you will see that there are 4 sections. We have the personnel and the fringe. We have the RIAC, LIAC parent and youth representative alternate section, where the money goes to support them and their role in RIAC. We have the RIAC infrastructure support. And then down here, the RIAC region-wide administrative cost. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to dive in on what exactly that looks like. Oh, and let me back up just a little bit to say that the department periodic reports are due periodically. So that's what this is. This is DPR form 131. They are due periodically throughout the fiscal year to the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. This form reports how funds and services are disclosed at plan and budget and how they've been utilized. The 131 is the form used to report how RIAC funds will be and have been utilized. All regions must submit this form as a planning tool with their plan and budget application, and that occurs in the spring. And it just it documents what they plan to spend, and as an implementation report, and then semi-annually and at the end of January, and then at July, and that just provides information about July through December expenses and January through June expenses. So with input from the RIAC, the 131 is completed by a designated individual at the Community Mental Health Center. It's reviewed by the RIAC for approval and or corrections that might be needed. Then it's signed by the LRC signifying RIAC approval, and then uploaded into the DPR system by that designated community mental health person. So let's take a deeper dive. Okay, so again, we've got section 1. So those are the funds that support the cost associated with the LRC and the others who assist with the operation of RIAC. This part right here is decided by the Community Mental Health Center. So the RIAC does not have any say in section 1. Section 2, again, is the RIAC Parent Youth Rep Stipend. Community mental health centers and RIACs are required to allocate a minimum of $2,400 to compensate RIAC and LIAC parent youth reps and their alternates for monthly RIAC meeting participation. So you can see down here in my blue how that math balances out to $2,400. And the RIAC, with approval of the Community Mental Health Center, should budget additional funds to support parent and youth reps and their alternates for professional development opportunities, for travel expenses, childcare expenses, participation on fair team meetings, community events, and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Section 3 is the RIAC infrastructure support. And I just want to point out that not all regions provide allocations in this area. This area goes to support RIAC program expenses such as meeting space, refreshments, which hasn't really been a thing here in the past couple of years because of the pandemic, but also RIAC project support. So this section right here is decided on by the RIAC and the Community Mental Health Center, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that in a second. Section 4 is that region-wide administrative cost, and we have nothing to do with that as a RIAC. That is a formula that is used at the department and sent to the Community Mental Health Center, and that's decided on by them. All right. So again, just breaking it down, one of the questions that we often get is how do these funds support regional system of care efforts? And so the reason I wanted to break this down this way is I wanted to show you how that works. So regional system of care efforts are supported by providing staff to coordinate the work of the RIAC. So you guys probably know after this year that each community mental health center is required to have an LRC. It is part of the Community Mental Health Center contract as a contract deliverable right here. And again, this amount is determined by the Community Mental Health Center. All right, so these funds also support regional system of care efforts in being youth and family driven. So, we support each RIAC having a youth alternate and a parent alternate. So we want to make sure that we have youth and parents with lived experience for their participation as equal stakeholders on the RIAC. This aligns with the National System of Care framework that supports the youth and family are involved in sustainable system level changes that support children and youth with or at risk of behavioral health needs at the program policy and system level. So again, the department does require that the community mental health centers allocate a minimum of $2,400 to compensate the parent youth reps for their attendance at each monthly RIAC meeting. You'll see in this section down here where it says other expenses that we do encourage RIACs to request additional funding from the community mental health center to support other expenses, such as those leadership development opportunities for RIAC parent and youth reps and their alternates to attend. We've got a lot of RIACs that are starting to support their parent and youth reps in participating in community outreach activities where they are informing the community about what the RIAC is and collecting data from the community about what the needs are for the populations that we serve. We also have RIACs that have parents that serve on the FAIR teams. Now, I'm going to make sure that I clarify this and say that participation on the FAIR team is for parents only. We don't want the youth rep participating on the FAIR team for obvious reasons, but we do support parents' participation on there. We want to be able to compensate them for that. This is also an area where mileage reimbursement would be included in there, mileage to and from leadership development opportunities or RIAC meetings when they're in person. And participation in meetings outside of the monthly RIAC meetings to support regional system of care efforts, such as on CIAC standing committees. And this can be done by using the 131 to track previous and or current expenses to justify what's needed for future budgets and to reallocate funds to cover the cost if and when needed. So what I mean by that is if you're looking at that, let's say, you know, next late winter, next spring, when you're working on this for plan and budget, and you're thinking, okay, we got to have 2,400 right here to support the parent and youth reps participation on the RIAC. Well, how much are we going to need here? Well, this 131 is a historical document that you can go back to and you can say, well, in previous years, this is what we've provided and this is what we've needed. And we also have the second part of this 131 is the actual expenses. So that will allow you to see like what you spent, if you spent outside of your budget, if you were under budget, and so forth. I do get questions sometimes about because community mental health centers want to know why we provide compensation to our parent and youth reps. And I do want to point out that it's in statute. Oh, you've got somebody unmuted. Okay, so in statute, it does say compensation to RIAC parent youth representatives and their alternates for all expenses incurred through the performance of their duties as council members. You know, as employees of state agencies and system of care partners, when we come together to meet to discuss needs and gaps to support Kentucky system of care, we are compensated for our time, and we look at our parents and our youth reps as equal stakeholders. So we want to make sure that they are compensated for their time, and that's why this is built in here. We also have this in our RIAC policies and procedures and on our DPR form 131A on the instructions. All right, so another way that we are supporting regional system of care efforts is with infrastructure costs. So just like we talked about with section 3, this is where you would put, you know, additional costs needed for meeting space or refreshments or other RIAC projects and supports. And you can put, like, if you were to receive a grant from the department or from your local ASAP board or from your MCO or any of those community partners, you know, that could go right here. Or if your community mental health center is able to provide additional funds to support components listed in your RIAC action plan, that's where this would go, right here. Just want to let you know that this is not something that we require at the department, but we strongly encourage it. So this is something that the RIAC would propose, additional funds needed in this area, something that the RIAC would propose to their community mental health center, but the approval is at the discretion of the community mental health center because these funds do have to come from somewhere. And again, not all regions provide allocations in this area. Something that we've talked about recently with RIACs when it comes to this area is, and it also goes back to section 2, but the cost of or the ability to provide technology to your RIAC parent and youth reps. that's something that you can request additional funding for from your community mental health center. Or let's back up a second. Let's say you had additional funds left over in section 2 towards the end of the year. Most of our meetings have become either virtual or they're moving towards hybrid. How do you plan for your RIAC parent and youth reps to be able to successfully join the virtual meeting and be able to effectively participate? So we have had some RIACs that are talking about purchasing tablets and Wi-Fi to ensure that their parent and youth reps do have access to the technology needed to be able to participate in those meetings. So that's just another idea. All right, and again, this is section 4. So we support regional system of care efforts by making sure that the community mental health centers allow for the administrative cost that it takes for the RIAC program. Again, we have nothing to do with this, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but this is built into the 131 form. All right, so let's talk a little bit about plan and budget. I get a lot of questions about this too, and I feel like most of our RIACs are coming along on this journey, and as they're learning about the 131 and when this should be reviewed, they're also learning about the RIAC's role in the budget. So as stated earlier, the 131 is submitted to the department 3 times within the fiscal year. And so the first time is at plan and budget, which is due to the department in mid-spring, and that's usually April. So in this part, it is the role of the RIAC to discuss what's needed to support the RIAC and LIAC parent and youth representatives on the RIAC from July through June. So we're talking about all 12 months of the fiscal year here. So again, we know that 2,400 is required by the department for the community mental health centers to allocate in there. But we need to have that discussion of additional monies needed to support those other expenses that we just looked at a second ago, such as the leadership development opportunities, childcare for the parent and or youth as they participate in the RIAC meeting, travel expenses and activities relevant to the work of the RIAC and system of care efforts. Also discuss what's needed for infrastructure support for July through June. So again, are there funds needed for special projects for the RIAC? Are there funds needed to support components of the RIAC action plan to ensure that outcomes and goals are met? And as you guys start to come back in person, are there funds needed for meeting space and refreshment? Those kinds of conversations need to take place before the plan and budget is submitted. And so when I think about it being due in April, I'm thinking that those conversations with all RIAC members need to start taking place probably in January. And what you can do is you can use the semi-annual expense report that's due January 31st for July through December expenses. You can look and see what's been spent within that 6 months to kind of project what you might need for the upcoming year as you're working on plan and budget, or you can look at historical documents such as the plan and budget from the previous fiscal year to see what you needed. Or you can look at that second page of the 131 to say, well, this is what we actually spent, but this is what we budgeted for, so this is what we really need. So anyway, these discussions need to be occurring with those on your RIAC, probably in late winter, so that when this form is due to the department, the RIAC has had a chance to have a say in it. All right. So the RIAC's role in the budget is not just at plan and budget when you're planning for the upcoming year, but it's also required throughout the year. So, required oversight of the budget by the RIAC as a semi-annual expense report. Again, these are due in January and July. The RIAC is required to review that, and then the LRC signs off on these expense reports. We do this to make sure that, for one, that our parent and youth reps and alternates receive compensation for meeting participation. These department forms come to me and well, the 131 does, and I approve it. And then I'll send it on to the department after I receive it from the community mental health center. A lot of times I've seen where I know I've been at the RIAC meeting and I know that a parent and or youth has been there, but I might see 0 and section 2 of the 131 stating that or signifying that there hasn't been any money taken out to pay that parent or youth rep. And it's just been an oversight on, the RIAC and or the community mental health center. So we review these to make sure that our RIAC parent youths are being compensated for attending. We review routinely to make sure that we're staying in the loop of remaining funds. So for example, let's say that you get to January and you haven't had a parent or youth rep on your RIAC, or you haven't had an alternate, let's say that. And so there's some additional funds in there because we haven't paid out all of that $2,400 that we've set aside for the parent and youth rep. Well, there might be leadership development opportunities that your parent or youth rep might be interested in attending. So they may request to go to one of those. So the RIAC would look at that. They would look at their budget to make sure that they had the funds to support it. They would vote on it as a RIAC, and then they could use those funds to send the parent and youth rep to leadership development opportunities. They could also look at it to see where they are with their funding. If they wanted to do I know that there are some RIACs that are doing community outreach booths that, again, they are there to promote a RIAC within their region to collect data on needs. So that would be something that we would want to compensate our parent and youth for. So just routinely looking at that form to see where we are within our budget, if there are additional funds to do those kinds of things, and just to see how we want to make sure that we utilize those funds appropriately before the end of the fiscal year, because those funds are reconciled at the end of the fiscal year. So you don't get to bank them and use them for the upcoming year. They have to be used. And again, we want to make sure that they go to what their intended purpose is. Documentation of the RIAC budget, discussion, decisions, approval, all those things should be documented in the RIAC meeting minutes. All right, so let's dive into how funds should be used. And so I'm going to break this down into the 2 different sections on the 131, because allowance and approval is very different for each section. So let's hone in on section 2. This is the parent and youth rep compensation area. So I get this question a lot. What can I spend these funds on? So let me just say that these funds should be directly spent on supporting RIAC and LIAC parent and youth reps and their alternates that serve on the RIAC. So this part covers their monthly meeting compensation at $50. That's the minimum. RIACs can vote to increase that amount, but again, you just have to make sure that your budget supports that. You can spend that money in section 2, again, on childcare while attending RIAC meetings as needed, mileage reimbursement to and from meetings and or system of care relevant RIAC approved activities, trainings and leadership development opportunities that support parent and youth reps in their role in the RIAC, participation in outreach activities that support local needs assessments to identify service gaps and needs or system of care awareness and expansion opportunities. Technology needed for parents and youth to serve on their RIACs, really amenities needed to support parents and youth in their role on the RIAC. You can also think about like business cards that would be able to help identify the parent and youth reps as they go out into the community, so they can, just be able to identify who they are within the different areas that they're working in, or if they're trying to increase parent and youth participation on the RIAC, again, just to be able to provide that card. And we do have some RIACs that do that, and it's been working successfully. And I think we've got some of those parents in the audience today. So hopefully we'll have a chance in a little bit for them to provide some information on that. Let's talk a little bit on what you cannot spend it on. The funds in Section 2 that are set aside for parent and youth reps, they cannot be spent on components of the action plan, such as special projects that are not relevant to RIAC youth and parent support. They cannot be spent on refreshments for meetings. They cannot be spent on meeting space expenses or incentives for the community. And a conversation that we have often when this question comes up is what it says on the DPR 131A, which is the 131 instructions. Reallocation of funds in this section requires discussion and majority vote of the RIAC. So any changes should be documented in the RIAC meeting minutes and summaries and include how the reallocated funds will be used to support parent and youth representatives. Reallocation of funds from this section to another section of the 131 requires approval from the Division of Behavioral Health, and DBH reserves the right to decline reallocation of the funds to areas that do not support parent and youth reps and or regional system of care efforts. So what I mean by this is, let's say you get to March of the fiscal year, and let's say that you've got $1,500 left over in this section. And there are things outside of the parent and youth rep support that you would like to use the spending for. You should have that discussion with your RIAC, and your RIAC should vote on it. But that's just step one. That request needs to be sent to the department for the department to provide approval on the reallocation of those funds, because those funds are intended for the parent and youth rep and their role in the RIAC, and that's where those funds should be spent. But there have been exceptions, but it does need approval from the department. All right, let's see here. Section 3, how should these funds be used? So this is the RIAC infrastructure support. So our goal is to support RIACs with requesting funding for this area, because again, this is not required and the money's got to come from somewhere. So again, this money can be used on the meeting space, the meeting refreshments, components of the action plan, RIAC special projects, system support for system of care awareness and expansion within the regions. Again, as a reminder, this isn't required. Not all regions provide allocations. Community mental health center funds provided in this area are at the discretion of the community mental health center. So again, that's something that we support RIACs and asking for funding ahead of time, utilizing historical documents to justify the needs. So example, previous fiscal year 131, regional data regarding needs and gaps impacting the population of focus, etc. So it's very important that when RIACs do request this funding from the community mental health centers, that the justification of why is there, because it is the RIAC's job to build the capacity for the funding. Now, let me also say that not all infrastructure funding has to come from the community mental health center. So think outside the box. You know, there are grant funding opportunities available, not only through the department, but they're available through community partners. I know that MCOs have been very supportive across the state in being able to add funding in. And when we do our panel session later on during this session, I think some of our LRCs and our children's service director might be able to talk to you about this. There's also in-kind donations. You know, if you are looking at printing flyers to put out in the community, or, you know, something with a QR code on it. I mean, who at the RIAC table can, you know, what community partner can take that piece and say, hey, our department or our agency can do that? Or, you know, if you're doing a community outreach event, hey, we can bring this, or we can donate time. I mean, so it's not just about what the community mental health center can do regarding extra funding, but really utilizing your system of care partners around the table, and even some that might not be traditional partners around the table that might be able to provide support in that area. Okay, let's see here. So let's talk a little bit about the process for using funds. So that monthly compensation for RIAC and LIAC parent youth reps and their alternates is required. So there's no process for doing this. Like there's no vote that needs to be taken unless you're going to increase that amount. This should be something that's automatic, meaning there is no discussion or vote, and it should occur monthly. Now, I will say that this is done a little bit different at each RIAC or at each community mental health center. So they all have their own process for this. But again, it's not something that has to be routinely visited because it should be automatic. Leadership development opportunities, community activities, meetings outside of monthly RIAC meetings, that should occur with a discussion and a budget review to ensure that sufficient funds are there to cover the cost. And then after that piece is done, then the RIAC would take a vote regarding the event and the amount of compensation. I do want to say that the amount of compensation for involvement outside of monthly RIAC meetings for parent youth reps, that is something that the RIAC has the authority to decide. And we have some tools that we've shared with RIACs, and I'm happy to share them again, that just kind of gives a guide on what the compensation rate could be for an hour or a day, or the amount of times the person is going to be participating in that event. But it just helps the RIAC to kind of look and say, okay, to make sure that we are working within our budget, this is how we're able to break this down and provide appropriate compensation for this person and not go over budget. And then just a reminder that RIAC members, including the parent and youth reps, are included in the discussion and the voting. And RIAC and parent youth reps can propose participation in activities and or meetings relevant to the work of RIAC and RIAC system of care efforts as well. Okay, so how should funds be monitored? Well, routine review of the 131, we've already said that it's required at least 3 times a year at minimum when plan and budget is being developed. And then the semi-annual expense reports are due January and July. So we're definitely looking at it then. Also, ideally, you want to look at it monthly or any time that funding decisions are made for the RIAC and or RIAC members. Whose responsibility is it? Well, it's the LRCs for requesting the form from their community mental health center. It's the LRCs and the chairs for sharing it with the RIAC. And then it's the LRC for signing off, signifying approval of the RIAC once decisions have been made. But ultimately, whose responsibility is it? It's all RIAC members, because all RIAC members should be reviewing it, discussing it, and approving it. And as stated earlier in another slide, review, discussion, and or approval status of the 131 should be documented in the RIAC meeting minutes. Okay, so how should funds be tracked? So it's required that these funds are tracked on the 131. They're tracked by the center with input from the RIAC. They're tracked through the department periodic reports, periodically throughout the fiscal year to report how funds disclosed at plan and budget have been utilized. And we also have optional tools, like I just mentioned. We have a RIAC parent youth rep time sheet and a tracking sheet that we've provided before. We're happy to provide that again. That does assist in tracking the activities that the parent and youth have participated in, as well as the monthly meetings. We also have RIACs that have their own budget and expense forms that they've created in addition to the 131. For questions regarding how it's tracked by each center outside of this, because I get that question a lot too, I encourage you to reach out to your supervisor to see who oversees this part at your community mental health center, because it is different across the board. I do want to point out again that funds that are not used by the end of the fiscal year are reconciled, meaning that they come back to the department. I did have a question from a RIAC at 5 o'clock last night who said, we've got $900 left over in section 2 of our 131. Can we use it for, and it was something outside of parent and youth reps. And unfortunately, those funds have to be used by June 30th. So that $940 has to come back to the department, which isn't a lot, but had planning occurred earlier, those funds could have maybe been reallocated to something that was included in their RIAC action plan to support one of their goals. Would any of the participants on the meeting, and I can't see anybody because I'm sharing my screen, would anybody like to share how your RIAC does this, how you track your funds outside of the 131?
I'll share it if you
Okay.
don't mind. It's
No.
Anne, by the way. Well, our budget is very confusing, and I'm not a numbers person. So I have taken it upon myself, as well as Robin, who is our children's services director, to meet with our finance department every 3 months, following up on the budget and what we're doing. We have had lots of grant funds as well, so we've had to kind of keep them separate. So keeping communication with the person who handles our budget is top priority, as well as myself keeping a cheat sheet, because Robin and I had that discussion the other day. I had to go back and see exactly what I had spent for our action plans, and because the end of the fiscal year was coming down. So it's on that LRC to make sure that they keep track of all the funds, all the expenditures, and then just knowing, who to talk to in your finance department. And that is very helpful. And as far as your parent rep, I use a stipend, and so I can track every expense he does by a stipend, which helps our finance department as well. Does that make sense?
And when you say stipend, what do you, I know that we refer to stipend as our parent youth reps get a stipend, but is that a special form that you use? Or?
I created a form for our parent and youth reps to complete every time they do something on the behalf of RIAC. Our parent rep is very active in all 10 of our fair teams. So in 1 month, he may have 8 to 10 spots where we owe him funds, and it just is able for me to keep track monthly. And we also reimburse him monthly through that stipend. So if he goes to 6 fair teams, that's 6 times 50. So we'll process a payment for that. And right now everything has been virtual, so we haven't had any mileage, but I have a feeling that will start changing.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
That did, yes. Does anybody else want to share before we move on?
As usual, Ann, clear as mud.
Well, Donnie Ray, I know you've got a solution to this too.
Yep, I walk across the street and talk to my finance department every other day. I'm not a numbers guy either, so I just trust in God and luck most of the time, and all those pencil pushers over there are doing me right. So I do keep a check on it. I don't have any forms. I sit down with my supervisor monthly and tell them what's on the agenda for RIAC, some other things that we might have going on, funding with grants or whatever. They do all the stuff and they send it to me to sign, and if it looks good, I sign. If it don't, I go across the street. That's the best I can do.
Well, like I said, everybody does it different, but as long as you're tracking it and it's on the 131, and that's a partnership between the LRC and the Community Mental Health Center.
Yeah.
And as long as that information is being shared with the RIAC, for not only just for them to see it, but for them to review it, discuss it, and approve it. And if they're not able to approve it because of a discrepancy or whatever, just to be able to have that conversation and see what needs to be fixed. Now we have to work within our parameters, meaning that there's that 2,400 that we know that's required, and anything outside of that, we really have to work on building the capacity for and garnering that support. And that's what we're here to do with the department. And, you know, our panelists that are on here today that have done it successfully are also here to help. I'm going to move on to our video because I know we're running a little bit behind. Leah's going to share a video clip from myself and Diane Gruen-Kidd on where the funding comes from. Right, so I am here with Diane Gruen-Kidd. Diane is the program administrator for Kentucky Impact, and Diane is with us today to give information on RIAC funds regarding questions that I often get. So Diane, thank you for agreeing to speak with us today on this.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So I am often asked where the RIAC funds come from. Can you talk about the funding source?
Yes. Those RIAC funds come from state general funds. So when you hear about state budgets and that kind of thing, the impact funding is part of that. And the way that it's set up is that the department gets impact funding. So there's one big umbrella that's impact funding, and underneath that umbrella is RIAC funding and also the funding for target case management and high fidelity wraparound, which is commonly known as Kentucky Impact. And those are together under that big umbrella. One of the things that becomes pretty clear to people who are working in RIAC, so your LRC, your RIAC chair, those folks, is that those funds are accounted for separately. So underneath that impact umbrella, we have two categories, and that's that RIAC funding and then the target case management and high fidelity wraparound Kentucky Impact funding. But the big umbrella, if you were to look at the budget plan and budget forms, is impact.
So is there any flexibility with these funds?
There is. The way that we've structured this system, I say we like I did it, it was done way before I got here, but the way that this funding structure is built, each center makes decisions about how they allocate those funds. So the department lets the center know, okay, you have this much money in impact funding, which is that big umbrella. Then the center makes a decision about how they allocate those funds. So some of those funds go to RIAC, some of those funds go to target case management and high fidelity wraparound. That's a center level decision. So the big pot of funding is what the department gives to the center. The center makes the decision about how those funds are allocated.
So if a RIAC is interested in requesting funds outside of what's required, because you know we do require that community mental health centers put in $2,400 to cover the RIAC parent and youth rep compensation for attending the meetings. Mm-hmm. If they are interested in requesting additional funds from the center, when should they be ready to submit this request to their respective community mental health center? And what would your guidance be on how they should go about doing that?
I would suggest one that RIACs check with their children's services director or whoever that person is to be sure that they're communicating with the right person. Every center has their own structure about how funds are allocated and who's in charge of that or who has say over that. So you want to check to see the best contact for your center. A lot of times it might be the CFO, but it might not be. So each RIAC's going to need to figure that out for themselves. My suggestion on that is, since there is some flexibility under there, is that RIACs be prepared to give information about why they're asking for certain monies. So one of the nice things about working with state government funds is that there are always accountability forms, right? So we have the Form 131 for RIACs and the Form 141 for targeted case management and high fidelity wraparound. And we have those forms for years and years. So if you're using your 131 as a RIAC to really make an accounting of where you're spending that money, you have the information in your historical documents that you could take to say, okay, for the last 2 years, we spent this much, or this cost has gone up, or whatever it is. You have the documentation there to be able to make that case. And then that, again, since those funds are allocated through the center, that's where you need to make that case, is with the decision makers in the center who are doing the allocations. I will say the caveat to that is that there is a limited amount of funding total. So over the years, as I've been working on plan and budget documents, one of the pieces of that gets talked about quite a bit, I think in RIACs historically was talked about a lot, is flexible funding. So those are those monies that are used to help fill gaps for families when they have treatment needs that aren't necessarily met, through a typical treatment route or that sort of thing, or things that'll support the treatment needs or the service plan goals. And so the funding is there, but that's the kind of push-pull that you get into. So as with any limited pot of funding, increases in one place is going to mean a decrease somewhere else. And so that's why careful discussion with your center and honestly with community partners. I mean, it's not like all the RIAC funding has to come from the community mental health center and from that impact funding. We have a great network of community partners who also might be able to support some of that work through their own funding of the work of the RIAC. So I think there are multiple ways that those needs can be, those financial needs can be met. And it's through that sort of collaboration and also knowing who the best people are to contact that's going to help be able to put those things in place.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I am seeing several RIACs that have been able to either utilize funds that have been provided by the managed care organizations. Some have been able to use funds that have been provided by their local ASAP boards.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that RIACs have been tapping into, and I hope to see that occur more and more. One of the questions that I get is, what happens at the end of the state fiscal year to unspent impact funds? Can these centers carry it over to the next fiscal year?
All those funds are reconciled at the end of the year. So no, it's not like a savings account where the RIAC could keep money. When I hear unspent RIAC funds or unspent impact funds, it feels to me like a thing that doesn't happen, because since it's under that one big umbrella, even if the RIAC said, okay, we were allocated this much for the year, but we only spent this much, I feel like probably those funds got spent somewhere that they didn't necessarily go completely unspent, but again, that's going to be center to center how that works out. But that's not something that the RIAC can keep. So the RIAC can't say, okay, we're going to allocate $20,000 this year. I'm just making up numbers. We're going to allocate $20,000 this year, but we're only going to spend $15,000. So next year we'll have $25,000. Like, it doesn't work that way. At the end of the year, all those funds are reconciled, and you start over with the next pot of money for the following year.
All right. Well, Diane, thank you so much for answering my questions that I had today over the RIAC funds.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I love talking about plan and budget stuff. So it's much more interesting than I thought it was going to be when I started state government, honestly. So, but I really I applaud the work of the RIACs and their work to build these community partnerships, because they are important in the scope of the whole impact program. If we don't have these kind of relationships built in the RIACs, it makes the work of impact even more challenging for the folks doing that work and for the families with whom we're partnering. So thanks for everybody's work on that.
All right, so we are going to move. Well, before we move into our panel session, does anybody have questions on what Diane and I talked about on there?
Yeah, can you give us an example of one of those projects that we could ask for? And would that include, I don't know, a raise? Just to throw that out there.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't believe that you can put a raise in there, but when you're talking about RIAC special projects, like that funding can be used, like Section 3, that funding can be used to support like components listed in your action plan, or let's say that your RIAC mid-year decides to do some like outreach events, like that would be, anything that supports regional system of care efforts. Some RIACs have taken that money and used it as incentives for for youth involved in the CDW program, like if they've kept their appointments or if they have increased their attendance at school, if they were on like a truancy diversion program or something. So that would kind of be like a special project. Does anybody else have any examples of a special project that you've done?
Jefferson County, we actually used our special project funding for a anti-gun violence campaign contest where we actually purchased the supplies in addition to our SOC funding because it was exceeding over that amount. But we actually used our special project funds for that. And then in our Salt River Trail RIAC, we're actually utilizing the special funds to purchase items to go into bags that we're providing to the families at a family engagement event. So there's different opportunities as far as
those are components listed in your action plan too, though, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So have any of you all supported a project that maybe wasn't listed in your action plan, but that supported regional system of care efforts?
Not financially, we haven't. I haven't.
No, not that I recall. It's always been tied to our action plan or something our parent rep wants to do.
And so ideally, I think when you can support the use of those funds by something that's listed in your action plan, I do feel like that's best practice, but I know that sometimes other things come up. And Serena, I'm going to put you on the spot real quick. And because I know that you guys have used additional funds to support incentives for when youth have shown progress in a certain area, that's not always necessarily listed in your action plan, is it?
I don't think it is listed.
Okay.
That was something that our RIAC decided many years ago and has continued doing. So that's, in my mind, that's what I always considered we were supposed to do our special project money with. So good example, and I didn't even realize it.
So as long as that money is built in under Section 3, the RIAC infrastructure, like that money couldn't be built in under Section 2 under the parent and youth rep support. But if it's built in under Section 3, again, it's not included on your action plan, but it's a RIAC special project to incentivize progress for youth who are doing better. All right. Anybody else have any questions before we move into the panel session? Okay. So what we're going to do now, I have invited Robin Gregory. He is the clinical director of children's services at LifeSkills. I've invited Embry. She is the LRC for the Barren River RIAC. And I've invited Michelle Cunningham. She is the LRC for Salt River and Jefferson RIAC. And the reason that I asked them to join us today is I noticed and it's not only this year, but especially this year when I was reviewing their plan and budgets for fiscal year 23, that they were able to support their RIACs and building in additional funds in Section 2 and Section 3 of their 131. So I wanted to ask them if they could speak to us on how they were able to make that happen. So I've got some questions for them, and after I ask each question, each panelist has the opportunity to answer, kind of like we did at our May RIAC Learning Series session. So the department requires that community mental health centers allocate a minimum of $2,400 each fiscal year, allowing RIACs to compensate parent and youth representatives and their alternates for those monthly meetings that they attend. During the fiscal year 23 plan and budget, your RIACs had additional funds allocated in this area. Can you speak to how the RIAC was able to get these additional funds approved by your community mental health center?
I can go first. We have used historical data. So this is what we've asked for in the past. This is what we've spent. So this is what we think we need to make this work in the upcoming year. And we do this in the spring during budget time. And like Diane said in the video, the RIAC funding is part of the bigger umbrella of the impact funding. And so we have told our finance folks that we want to use part of that funding that's a little bit more flexible in that impact funding to put it towards some things for RIAC. We've never really gotten any pushback from it. They've been very good. Our folks, at least, have been very good about trying to make happen what we want and say that we need to serve the needs when the funds are flexible and how they can be used.
I'll follow up on that if that's okay. I think Robin and I have been here a very long time, but I think having the agency really know what RIAC does and having them invested in us and seeing all the things we do and we bring the potential makes it a lot easier, because sometimes we have funds that we can utilize through our company because they see what we're doing and they want to support us. So communication with, let them know, hey, RIAC is a big, important part, and just really having that buy-in. And like Robin said, having Robin and myself really participate with those wraparound dollars, because I'm also over the Kentucky Impact Program. So, being involved and having them ask us what we need those funds for is extremely important than them just putting it on something. Does that make, Robin, does that sound like about right?
For our agency, I normally have collaborated with our impact director, our program director, and we've got really strong voices on our RIACs as far as our parent and youth, who basically will tell us what the needs are and what their interests are and what they want to actually do. So hearing what outreach efforts that they've actually wanted to commit to or that they're involved in helps us be able to allocate having additional funds in our RIAC built in so that we can make sure that those things are actually supported.
So I've got a question before we move on to one of our other questions, and it's something that you said, Anne, that I think that some RIACs have challenges with, and you said that communication is the key, and not that our RIACs have challenges with communication, but sometimes communicating the progress or the needs to the community mental health center and having their buy-in. So how do you at the Barren River RIAC support that ongoing communication between the RIAC and the decision makers at the community mental health center?
Well, I'm a very loud voice and I'm very passionate, and I think, they know me. But honestly, I think just being the advocate that we are in showing, well, let me backtrack. Okay. So we do a lot of projects for the Department of Behavioral Health, and that really does help when we are when we're very active with the things that you all are supporting, such as the System of Care 5 and applying for those grants. So really being kind of taking that step above and asking for other funds to help what our action plan supports, and really just showing the need, using data, using community partners, and really just showing, hey, we need to be here and we need these funds and this is valuable. And I think as far as communication, Robin and I communicate a lot, and then I think he communicates with the VP, and it just goes on and up. And I kind of think that's really how we do it. Robin, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I meet with the vice president for behavioral health here at LifeSkills every 2 weeks. And so I always give a rundown of the programs and things that I'm over. One of those, of course, is RIAC and Impact. So she's very aware of what we're doing as a RIAC and what's going on. And, if there's other partners on RIAC, social services, health department, or whatever, that are taking the lead on some things, I make sure that she knows that. So that she can see how we are communicating and working well with other community partners. And then one other thing that I do, our monthly board meeting always has a little bit of time in there for some sort of, program spotlight or some sort of something, and they try to rotate it around, and they'll say, oh, let's have something from children's services, let's have something from adult services or whatever. And so I always take that chance to talk about, what is it our RIAC is doing, or what is it that we're doing in some other areas of children's services and stuff. So I try to make sure that RIAC just isn't something that we have to do because the state says we have to do it, but I try to make sure that I promote the things that we are doing within the agency so that they know. And then when it comes to budget time, it's a lot easier to ask for funds because they are aware throughout the year of how we're using those funds.
I think too, if you can like tie in how it impacts your families and the clients that you guys are serving as well, directly, because you are, helping them in meeting the needs that they're actually identifying. I think that actually will speak volumes within the higher ups within your organization. We actually have our vice president actually sits in on our RIACs, both of them actually. So she takes that information of what each RIAC is doing and actually takes it up to the board levels, even the CEO and, higher up beyond my pay grade, but whatever it is that we're talking about and identifying as far as the needs and how that impacts the families that we're actually serving. I think that puts kind of like a face to, hey, this is the reason why we're asking for these things. This is the reason why we're asking for an increase, or this is the reason why we're spending the money on this particular, area, because it's going back to serve, the people that we're providing the services for.
Thank you all. That's very good information. How does your RIAC support the parent, youth, and alternate reps aside from the compensation that they receive for participation in the regular monthly meetings? For example, are there trainings, activities, or meetings that they participate in?
Well, I'll take this one. We have a very, very active parent rep who has been around. Basically, I provide a lot of communication via email, text messages. He is very involved in individual fair team meetings. So making sure the court designated specialist had the parent rep contacts and really making sure that parent rep contact information is offered through all of our agencies so they know they can reach out to him. But I will give Sonny kudos to himself because he takes it on himself to really be involved with KPFC, the joint meetings, and really just being an advocate for other peer supports. But I always include him in everything. And if he wants to go, I just ask him, to let me know because those funds are for him and our youth. Now, our youth, we don't have right now. So I always encourage Sonny to do, whatever he feels important. And then he can bring it back to our RIAC and report out on it.
I'll go because we actually have our parent rep that's attending. So she wants to speak, she can. But she's actually very involved as well. And we just recently had added a parent alternate. For a while. It was just her. So she was kind of doing everything, and God love her, she's everywhere in Louisville. But she actually will report out on activities that she's engaged in with the SEAC. And then anything that I get as far as the trainings or opportunities, whether it be coming from Vanessa or from the state or from KPFC, then I send that out to her, and she normally will respond back pretty quickly via either text or email or call as far as, hey, is this something I can attend? Is it virtual? She'll ask those questions to get more information, and then, she'll go and then she reports back on it. So encouraging and supporting those efforts when she's wanting to attend additional education opportunities or trainings or conferences or community outreach. And then answer any kind of questions that she may have, or the other parent alternate or the youth reps, if there's areas that they want to attend or if they want to pursue additional like certifications, things of that nature. So making sure that they have the right tools in place, having that communication to make sure that they feel supported as far as self-esteem, or if they're nervous about speaking at an event or a training that they're going to be attending, then a lot of times I'll jump on with them. Just so that they like have a familiar face also attending in place of something that they're going to, but making sure that they have all of the information that's being given to us. I filter out to both the parent and the youth so that they also have that opportunity to be able to attend those.
And can you all speak to how the whole RIAC is involved in this process, or the RIAC members? I'll say that.
Well, if it's like something that's cost wise, then we'll submit that to the RIAC to say, hey, you know, if, and I'm just going to use a hypothetical situation. If we have somebody who wants to become peer support certified, and there's a cost of that, and let's just say that the training's $300, but you know, you have somebody who wants to attend that, then you take that to the RIAC and say, is this something that we could cover so that they don't have to pay that, you know, $300 out of pocket? Or there was a recent training opportunity that just came out for somebody to attend, but it was $40. Then we could take that back to the RIAC and say, you know, this is something that they really want to attend, and here's the reasons why. Here's how it would better them. Here's how it would support them within the RIAC as far as maybe their roles or whatever their responsibilities are designated to them in the RIAC. But then bringing that to them for a vote so that they can actually cover that cost, and that's not a burden to the families.
All right, so you kind of touched on this, but I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive. How has their involvement in activities and or trainings outside of the monthly RIAC meetings impacted their participation on the RIAC or their regional system of care efforts in general?
I think it provides them to have an opportunity to have their voices. That they feel confident. It's giving them skill building, you know, self-esteem as far as being able to get out there and find out exactly what the needs are of the community and actually feel confident in being able to have those conversations with other people. You know, that within itself, communication skills, you know, is definitely something that, you know, people either you're really good at, like I don't like talking in front of a bunch of people, and, you know, my face will probably turn red after a while. But some people are really good at it and they can just, you know, fly off the handle and talk, and then other people get very anxious. So having them, you know, learn skills to be able to be confident in the role that they are currently, you know, doing as a representative, I think that that is extremely helpful for them. In addition, it gives them a support circle. So, you know, when they're out there doing, you know, and they're involved in the community, they're out there doing trainings and they're learning about, you know, information, and they have somebody that comes up to them and wants to talk about something, that it gives them a support circle that maybe they didn't have before, like especially people that are living in foster care, you know, and they age out. They don't necessarily have a family network. So building that connectivity to other providers and other support systems is really crucial to them. But giving them the tools to be able to do that is also very beneficial.
Well, and I was going to say, I think it's also beneficial for the members of RIAC to hear and see what is actually going on. You know, a lot of our RIAC members are members because they work for an agency that's supposed to be there, or the agency wants them there or whatever, but they're not necessarily somebody who has a history of mental illness or substance use or something like that. And so with our parent and youth representatives, you know, they get to hear firsthand, you know, we're talking about doing this action or helping with this. How does that help the people that it is truly supposed to affect?
And I've noticed too that both of your all's RIACs, you all have your parent and youth built into your agenda. For example, Michelle, on the Jefferson RIAC, I know that Adrienne provides the SEAC update. So she is informing the members about state level system of care efforts, because what she's learned at SEAC meeting. And then at the Barren River RIAC, I know Sonny gives updates on fair teams that he attends. So he's talking about, you know, needs, gaps, trends, those kind of things. And he's informing Barren River RIAC of what those are. So I love how you guys have built them into the meeting. They have that vital role on there. I mean, they have a much bigger role than that, but they're reporting back on what those regional and or state level system of care trends look like. So how often do you as a RIAC leader go over the RIAC budget?
I do it every time I have to submit it to you. Prior to the pandemic, I don't know if I ever had really submitted it to the RIAC. So I start doing it every time I have to, submit it. And sometimes our RIACs are like, oh, what is this? But it's a good thing to go over. So I just show it to them. I email it as well. And then we discuss it and put it in our minutes.
We do it on the initial budget of development, and then we do it at least minimum the twice when we have to do the expenditures. But then if we have like changes, like for our Salt River, we only have one parent rep right now. We're still trying to recruit for our alternate and then for our youth. So obviously there's still funds that's available on that, but we're working, actually both RIACs were working on special projects. So we were constantly having to look at where we were at on spending based on the supply costs that, when we were purchasing things. So we were revisiting what our costs were. So anything like that, when we're looking at changes within the budget, we'll address in our RIAC minutes as well.
And Anne, I love that you send that out to your RIAC members too before the meeting, so they have the opportunity to look at that and bring questions with them. Because sometimes when we're at a RIAC meeting and we have a bunch of things that we're trying to get accomplished in that little bit of time, it's easy just to skim through things. So I like that you're sending that ahead of time too. I haven't thought about encouraging other RIACs to do that. So what is your recommendation on how to go about garnering support for additional funds from the community mental health center to support regional system of care efforts?
Go talk to the upper people and get them to buy into what your RIAC is doing. And it's not really a buy-in because we all do great things in our region. I can't stress enough to be proactive on the budgets, try to be involved with your children's director, and really just word of mouth. If you have a good thing going, people talk about it. And I love hearing things. Oh, you're with that RIAC. And I'm like, yeah, I am. So really just word of mouth and sharing the successes of what we do and just engaging the community and making sure everybody buys into it, especially those finance people that do those numbers.
One thing that, it may not be possible in all community mental health centers, but one thing that we've done here at LifeSkills is we have tried to move as many people out of the RIAC and impact funding so that we're not having to spend so much on personnel costs and fringe, so that frees us up for having more funds to use on special projects and things like that. You said it yourself, though, earlier in the meeting, if there's only a certain pot of money and it's all got to come from somewhere. So if you move people out from being covered there, then where are you going to put them? And so having some thoughts about that or always looking for various ways that, we could use this money to pay this person. So then that would free up some RIAC grant dollars or whatever. But I found that our finance folks are a lot more agreeable to do things like that when I go with them and say, we've got this over here, let's do this and let's do that, as opposed to just saying, we want more money or we want to use money for this and how can we get that money?
We've been really blessed, I should say, of being able to partner with our NCOs that are here in our local area. They've been phenomenal. So building a relationship with your partners that are at your RIAC, because they all have funding opportunities as well. So really building a good rapport with the other people that are there, and then including them in the things that you guys are working on or what you're doing, and then getting them involved. So if we have events, we're inviting them. If they have trainings, we're attending them. So it's a very give and take relationship so that we can support each other. And when you're building that relationship, then they're more apt if you're telling them of a need that's coming available, or that there's an ask that you want to have, then they're more willing to reach out to their finance people to say, hey, can we maybe spend some of this money over here to this agency because this is the initiative that they're working on, because you've built that relationship with them and they know that you're really going to be spending it on what you're saying that you're spending it on, and that you're providing them kind of like an outcome response of, hey, here's what we've done. Here's what you've been included on. Here's the money that we've been spending. Here's what the outcome was of whatever it is, event or activity or outreach that maybe you've, done or spent the money on. but they have something that they can then take back to their providers or their employers as well and say, here, here's where our money went, and this is, really good. And it's getting their name out there as well, that they've been included on whatever that initiative is. So really building that partnership with your other providers that are on your RIAC is very crucial, especially your community providers that maybe aren't necessarily mandated members, but they're there because they have an interest in what the RIACs are doing.
One thing that I think this is what Michelle's talking about, but she didn't, explicitly say it. But we always try to use our RIAC dollars last. So if we have a need or we're wanting to do something, Ann and I will always ask health department, do you have funding for this, or family resource center, or several of our MCOs have kicked in some things or done some things. And so Ann and I hold on to the RIAC money as tightly as we can, and then give it out and use it when we are the last option, just to try to make it go further.
That's a great idea and a great way to utilize those community partners who can pitch in, where they can. And when you guys were talking about, alerting your communities and your partners on things that you've done, it reminded me of an infographic that Lee has created, I think, for the standing committees to show what they've done. And so, you guys have various people that are sitting around the table. There's somebody on that RIAC that's creative with like Canva or something like that. But just to be able to create, a document that shows, what your regional system of care efforts look like in your community, and, the impacts that your efforts have made, that might be something to consider. So you can hand to the community partners when you're asking for funding, or just for, RIAC awareness and expansion in the community as well. So we have about 10 minutes left. And so I want to open it up for questions. We've got Diane Gruen-Kidd on here with us now too. She was part of the video segment a little bit earlier. She couldn't join us earlier due to a prior commitment, but if anybody has comments or questions that they would like to ask any of our panelists, including Diane, now's your chance. No questions? It was all clear as mud?
Clear as mud. I asked my question about an example for, one of those special projects, and but you three hit the nail on the head, top to bottom, left to right. Appreciate it. But I will say the MCOs are huge. I've got the best group I've ever had. And then the regional prevention folks, they have more money than the government, it seems like. So anytime you can tap into those guys and those girls, you better get on that train. So I got a good rapport with them. We're doing a lot of stuff, back to school bashes, health fairs, sports physicals. And, like, I don't know, maybe who said it, that you're getting your name out there as well. So it's huge. I don't really have a question, but just a compliment. So thank you.
Agencies have like outreach teams, and I don't think that a lot of people realize that that's like their sole job is to do outreach and community partnership. So there's funding that goes behind those roles too, because it's kind of like a marketing, and you have to kind of understand where everybody's roles are and what their purpose is, in regards to, the providers that they work for, and how do you utilize that? So building that relationship with the people that that can get funding, or they know somebody that, it's very much like networking, that, they know somebody that knows somebody. And then, you're sharing what your initiatives have been, or what your missions are, or what your values are within your RIAC, or the things that you're working on. I think building that relationship with those community providers is going to be crucial as far as the extended funding, so that you can not only just meet your bare minimum as far as what we're required to do, but then you can actually grow and meet a lot of the needs that are being identified, especially when you're having your parent reps or your youth reps saying, hey, here's, something that the families are being, or telling us, or here's something that I really want to get, behind. then, we're kind of fixated on a small amount of money, but you can partner with other providers that also have funding. So building that capacity is going to be crucial to being able to sustain funding wise and program wise and supports within your RIACs.
And some of those community partners that I've noticed just across the state, I know local ASAP has been very supportive, I believe, in the bluegrass area. And then, like we were talking about with MCOs, they might not always come out and say, hey, we've got a grant that you can apply for $10,000. But I have noticed that as RIACs are talking through their action plans and talking about funding that's needed, every now and again, one will speak up and say, well, we do offer sponsorship opportunities and we'd like to sponsor that. So it might not be something that's thrown out there, but when you ask, they are usually willing to help and able to provide, significant funds. Trying to think about others that our RIACs have tapped into. Oh gosh. I know a lot of different community partners have provided in-kind donations as well, which is also helpful. So again, Robin, I like what you said earlier about reaching out to your system of care partners first and saving some of those RIAC funds for later when the other pots might be dry. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, I want to thank Robin and Ann and Michelle for joining us today as panelists and for the information that they've provided. Also want to thank Diane for joining me in that video clip. Before we close out, I do know that we've got a question in the chat box, and it says, what about video so that when networking people can look to learn about RIAC and SEAC? So Adrian, are you asking like videos that could be created by RIAC and SEAC to be able to put on like archived on the RIAC webpage to be able to send out for people to learn more about them? Yeah.
Yes. Reason why I'm asking, because when I go different places, people are like, well, what is this? What's the piece of paper about? I don't understand it. So that's the reason why I was asking, so they can kind of get a feel like, yeah, I want to join, or I might ask my son or daughter to join. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And we have had that conversation before at the department about the possibility of being able to provide short segments on just like an overview, kind of like the one pager, but just in a video. So that is something that's on our radar. We haven't actually developed it yet. I do know that with our webpage and the resources that we have available on there, especially with the RIAC YouTube channel, we've got some information that includes both RIAC and SEAC. Some of them are a little bit longer and not quite what we're looking to pare down, but there are some resources on there that can be utilized until we can get some of those other resources developed. But I do think that that's a great idea.
And I'll also jump in. We've not been as high tech to do videos or anything, but we've done some brochures and some flyers. Just kind of, this is what RIAC is, and Ian's used them for recruiting members sometimes, and just to kind of again get the word out there of who we are. So we'd be happy to share any of that stuff if people are interested.
Thank you, Robin. And I am going to share the PowerPoint from today that includes Robin, Ann's, Michelle's, and Diane's contact information on the end of it. So if you guys want to reach out to them about any of the information that they've provided today, I'm sure that they would not mind at all. And thinking about along the lines of what Robin said, I know that we've got, again, like the one pagers and things like that, that we are happy to share as well. All right, well, I have listed the session evaluation in the chat box. Also, if you need a certificate of attendance, please reach out to me. And the workshop will be recorded and posted on the YouTube channel. So that'll probably be later today or next week. So please feel free to check back, share that with your RIACs if you want to inform them about the 131 as well. Oh, and Adrian just asked, does RIAC or SEAC have a Facebook page? We do not have a RIAC page at the department. We leave that up to individual RIACs to develop because they're all working on different areas of focus within their region based on the needs. Lee, I'm going to let you speak to SEAC.
SEAC does not have a Facebook page. As you know, SEAC is made up of about 15 different council members, all representing different agencies, different departments across the cabinet, as well as some private agencies, and a child and family rep. So we do not have a SEAC Facebook page. We do have a SEAC website. And then when we have information to share, we ask that each agency, if they have their own page, to share that in social media, but there is not one centralized Facebook page for SEAC information.
All right, thanks, Lee. And thanks for joining us today. Our next RIAC Learning Series session is scheduled for August the 5th, and we will send that out in an email. What the session title is for that, I believe it's on utilizing system of care 5 funds. But I just want to thank you guys for being with us today. I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend, and we will see you back next month.
Vanessa, I got a question.